Hello, my hoopiest of fruits. How are you doing? I have decided I would read this book on my channel. It's about 20 years old. It's about the year 1999 leading up to the year 2000. That's the countdown. And this is the first book called January. And it is written by, wait, where's the author? Ah, there. Daniel Parker, just to give credit for this future madness. So, I'm not a great reader, but I'm gonna try just because I know that, like, nobody's heard of these books, and it might be fun to explore what people thought that 2000 would be, like, 20 years ago. So, and also, I'm going to mispronounce a lot. So, don't get on me too hard. Okay. Thanks. Prologue. 10:55 a.m., January 1st, 1999. 8:55 a.m., Greenwich Mean Time. Secret Russian military installation at Polostrovkanyin, north of Arctic Circle. Colonel Yuri Petrovich stood on the tiny wooden platform of the lookout tower, staring once again across the shadowy, frozen wasteland that stretched before him. There was nothing to see, of course. Even in the summer months, when the sun managed to skirt above the horizon, there was nothing to see. In the 5 years that he'd been here, the view had remained perfectly stagnant, like a bad photograph. The door behind him opened and slammed. Yuri groaned quietly. He wasn't in the mood to chat. "Good morning, Colonel," said a cheery young voice in the darkness. Yuri didn't bother to reply. He absently fingered the launch keys on the chain around his neck. "Good morning?" he asked himself with a scowl. What was good about him? What was good about being stuck a few hundred kilometers from the North Pole in the dead of winter? What was so damn good about guarding a pile of rusted metal? And Happy New Year, the voice added. Yuri sighed. His breath formed an icy cloud against a starless sky. New Year's Day always put him in a foul mood, particularly in this dismal place. He turned and glanced at the scrawny soldier, bundled in combat boots and a thick white snowsuit, a machine gun slung over his shoulder. Foolish boy, Yuri couldn't help but think. It was Nikolai Militov, a new arrival, barely 20 years old. Yuri knew that Nikolai was thrilled to be stationed here, where the temperature never rose above freezing, where the sun set for the last time in November and didn't rise again until February. After all, it was an honor to serve at Polostrovkanyin. The high command in Moscow wouldn't even tell them what they were guarding. The weapons here were that secret. Not even Yuri knew. No. But Yuri knew one thing. He knew that Nikolai was in for a big surprise. The thrill of the top-secret assignment would wear off soon enough. Frostbite, boredom, and depression would take its place. Nikolai cleared his throat. "Private Pushkin and I wanted to know if you wanted to join us for a drink in the launch center, sir," he stated. Yuri regarded him for a moment. In the buzzing fluorescent light, Nikolai's pockmarked skin looked deathly pale, except for his nose, which had already turned red. The boy looked terrible. Then again, Yuri supposed that he himself didn't look much better. At least Nikolai was young. Yuri, on the other hand... Nikolai flashed a nervous yellow grin. "A toast to celebrate the new year?" "You want me to abandon my post?" Yuri interrupted. Nikolai's grin vanished. No, sir," he stammered. No sense of humor," Yuri thought grimly. He doesn't get it. Did Nikolai truly believe that they needed to protect this forgotten dump? From whom? Russia no longer had enemies. Russia wasn't important enough to have enemies. "I'm teasing," Yuri murmured, forcing a tired smile. "You'll have to forgive my strange sense of humor. Yes, I could use a drink right now. Thank you." Nikolai nodded, then breathed a quick sigh of relief. He opened the door. Yuri hurried into the worn spiral stairway, overcome with the sudden loneliness he always felt when he'd been misunderstood. The older he got, the less people seemed to understand him. Yes, he did need a drink right now. Badly. "You know, it's nearly 11 in the morning, Yuri commented, pausing at the steel door at the bottom of the steps. "Aren't we supposed to raise our glasses at the stroke of midnight?" "It's midnight somewhere, sir," Nikolai replied. Yuri chuckled. So the boy did have a sense of humor after all. "Spoken like a true Russian alcoholic," he muttered. He punched the 15-digit security code into a grid of numbers next to the door, then stood back as the door hissed open and locked in place. He didn't bother closing it. Why should he? It was too much of a hassle. Besides, he was here to get drunk, not worry about meaningless security procedures. Comrade Colonel, Private Sasha Pushkin bellowed drunkenly from inside the lawn center. Happy New Year! Yuri smirked. The young man was sprawled across the dragged concrete floor, half out of his snow snoot, his head propped against a bank of outdated computers. His black eyes were glazed. A grubby, half-finished bottle of generic vodka stood at his side. Looks like somebody began the party without us, Yuri remarked dryly. He glanced back at Nikolai. Nikolai shrugged. Sorry, Comrade Colonel, Sasha mumbled. Yuri took a step forward and stomped the bottle at the floor. Why do you insist on calling me Comrade anyway, Private Pushkin? He asked. His tone was playful. I haven't been called Comrade in over 8 years. Sasha belched and hiccuped. Respect, sir, he slurred. Respect? Yuri snickered, raising his bushy eyebrows. For what? For the Cold War, Sasha proclaimed. For communism. For the days of the Soviet Union, when the whole world trembled at our feet. Yuri's smile dissolved. He raised the bottle to his lips. Ah, yes. How bright the future had seemed in the heady days of the Cold War. He took a long slug of vodka, wincing as the bitter liquid plunged into his empty stomach. Bam! Then relaxing as ripples of warmth spread throughout his body. His eyes grew misty. All that remained of the Soviet Union were crumbling in obsolete bases like this one, pitiful monuments to the glorious days of the past. Did anyone remember what kind of secret weapons sat idling here? Happy New Year, Comrade Colonel, Sasha said dully. Yuri took another gulp. Happy New Year, he said. May we all... He broke off mid-sentence. The lights had gone out. Just like that. So much for getting drunk, Yuri thought. One moment he was in the midst of a toast, the next he was standing in pitch blackness like an idiot. He couldn't see a damn thing. It was as if somebody had draped an inky velvet hood over his head. Perfect, he groaned. Another power failure. Sasha giggled in the dark. What should we do, sir? Nikolai said anxiously. Don't be so nervous, Nick, Sasha chided. We lose power all the time. The lines freeze and collapse. She'll get used to it. Yuri shifted the vodka bottle to his left hand and gripped for his walkie-talkie on his belt. The best thing to do is stay right here, he said. I'll contact the patrol and instruct them to locate the problem. After a few seconds of fumbling, his gloved fingers wrapped around the familiar plastic shape. He lifted the walkie-talkie to his lips and flicked a switch. Unit 1, do you read? He asked. There was no response, not even the crackle of static. Unit 1, he repeated, frowning. Silence. Yuri's eyes narrowed. The walkie-talkie wasn't working. He flicked the switch again, but the speaker emitted no sound. There should have been static. Can't raise them, sir? Sasha asked. No, it's not that, Yuri murmured distractedly. I think the walkie-talkie's dead. There was a pause. Dead? Sasha asked. The word was clipped. He no longer sounded drunk. Is it the battery, Colonel? Yuri tried the switch one last time. He licked his lips. He suddenly felt lightheaded. It couldn't be the battery. He changed the battery yesterday. Is it the battery, sir? Nikolai demanded. No. For a moment, the black room was perfectly silent. Yuri's pulse quickened. Sasha and Nikolai must have been thinking the same thing. Only one phenomenon could kill the power in the launch center and in the walkie-talkie. Only one. A powerful electromagnetic pulse, the kind caused by an explosion of some sort. That sound, Nikolai whispered. Yuri held his breath. What the... Nikolai was right. There was a sound. Something that drifted in and out of the air. It sounded sweet and high-pitched, like... Singing, Sasha croaked. A choir. Shh! Nikolai hissed tremulously. The sound faded. Yuri's mind began to race. It was singing. So that was a good sign. One of the patrolmen must have been listening to music. In that case, the power outage couldn't have been caused by an electromagnetic pulse. Maybe the walkie-talkie just happened to break at the exact same moment that the power had failed. It was a coincidence, a fluke. The walkie-talkie was just another piece of poorly manufactured crap like everything else in this place. Besides, the chances were 1 in a billion that anyone would attack, right? Yuri held his breath again. Right? As if the question demanded an answer, there was a faint rat-tat-tat of machine gun fire. The vodka bottle slipped from Yuri's fingers. It shattered on the floor. "This can't be happening," Nikolai murmured in a ghastly voice. "It's—" "Shut up!" Sasha barked. Yuri whirled and stumbled past Nikolai. 1,000,000,000 he thought desperately. He hurtled up the stairwell, then burst through the door onto the lookout platform. Freezing wind whipped at his face. The sky hung over him like an indigo blanket. He crouched by the guardrail and withdrew his revolver, but he felt oddly detached from the situation, as if he were dreaming. Then he peered over the side. My God! Dozens of shadows were moving swiftly and silently toward the entrance below. Of course, when the power had failed, the electric fence had failed too. The base was wide open. Another burst of machine gun fire tore through the dim half-light, followed by screams, then by a final shot, so close that it seemed to come from the bottom of the steps. Yuri's stomach squeezed. He couldn't focus. The situation was unraveling much too fast. "They've already penetrated," he realized. Blood drained from his face. "They've already reached the launch center." He pivoted to face the door. A silhouette was standing there. "I'm dead." For the first time in his life, Yuri was too frightened to react. He'd been in combat before, but this was different. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. His entire being, his senses, his thoughts, everything had been reduced to a single conclusion. His life was over. The silhouette drifted toward him. Amazingly enough, even in his petrified state, Yuri was still able to admire how this person, this attacker, moved with such a grace, like a ballet dancer. And the uniform. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. A loose, hooded black robe, not at all military. It seemed almost religious. "Who are you?" Yuri breathed. "What do you want?" There was no movement. He had to move. His trembling fingers struggled to cock the pistol, to raise it toward the attacker's shattered face. His jaw dropped. This isn't happening. He was certain of that now. None of this was real. It couldn't be real, because the face didn't belong to a soldier. It belonged to a beautiful teenage girl, with slender cheekbones, full lips, smooth skin, and shiny dark eyes. She kicked the pistol from Yuri's loose grasp and in one deft maneuver swiped the launch keys from around his neck. "Impossible," he murmured, and then she was gone, back down the stairs to the launch center. Yuri collapsed back against the guardrail. The wind burned his nose. His knuckles stung where he'd been kicked, but he knew that he was simply trapped in the throes of some vivid nightmares. Yes, he was even to begin to feel a peculiar sort of relief. In a moment he would wake up. The sound of that sweet, hypnotic singing began to drift up to the stairwell. Yuri gaped blankly at the open door. What language was that? It sounded like gibberish. He listened carefully, but after a few seconds the song was drowned out by a deep, low rumble. The rumble grew until it filled Yuri's ears. The platform vibrated in sympathy. Yes, of course, the weapons, whatever they might be, were being detonated. But how could they be detonated when the base had no power? It didn't matter. Yuri was no longer afraid. In fact, he almost smiled. "All a dream," he said to himself. An absurd dream. He knew that the absurd dream must have been responsible for a suddenly prickling sensation creeping up his spine. It was responsible for the strange heat on the back of his neck, for the loss of moisture in his mouth, for the beads of sweat on his forehead. He was hot, wasn't he? All a dream. No, he was more than hot. He was on fire. His breath came in quick, short gasps. Spearing pain shot through his arms and legs. It spread to the very tips of his fingers and toes. "All a dream," he repeated to himself. The words became a private mantra, a silent chant repeated over and over again. Panting, he peeled off his snowsuit jacket, his shirts, his thermal underwear, until nothing stood between his naked torso and the sub-zero Arctic air. Still he burned. All a dream. He stared down at his belly. The pudgy flesh there was puckering into thick black welts. It started falling off his body. Never before had he experienced such pain, never in his waking life. Blood bubbled forth, revealing hissing organs, blackened bones, charred artery. He was melting from the inside out. All a dream, all a dream, all a